Hi everyone. Some of you do know me, but my name is Kamila and I work as a CTO in a company called Talcan Analytics. And today here with me is Baz, who is in charge of the whole product. And I also have Greg, who is representing the development company in Łódź called Goody Labs. And I'm here. I want to tell you a story which hopefully will be interesting for you. My goal today is not specifically to teach you anything in detail, and I don't think that's the reason you come to these presentations anyway. But I hope I will give you some pointers into things that are worth looking into or things that you should keep in mind that are easily forgotten. And I hope you enjoy it anyway. I think I am a little bit stressed, so just in case I've put some links to tweets, which might not be totally relevant to the presentation, but hopefully will make you smile or at least will help me relax while I'm doing the presentation and break for a little. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt me, raise your hand, and I'm hoping you will be part of this presentation and you'll be involved during the presentation as I speak. I plan to talk for briefly half an hour to 40 minutes. We'll see how that goes. Can everyone hear me well? Yes, okay. So with that, so I moved to London more than half a year ago. And London is an interesting place to be in terms of technology because, as you might imagine, it's really famous for its financial services, the City of London. A lot of banks have their headquarters, the London Stock Exchange. But also at the same time, there is a lot going on in terms of the technology. And we have a place which is now dubbed Silicon Roundabout, and the government, the UK government actually, is investing in technology and is making it kind of their priority. So there is a lot going on in both of these areas, and obviously as a consequence of that we have a lot of startups focus on financial services. So we have a lot of development of mobile apps for banks, we have a lot of other apps for transactions, mergers and acquisitions, investor relationships, and all of that. What is also interesting from the point of the resourcing in these startups is that unlike in Silicon Valley, where people who are maybe they're teenagers and they are really ambitious, their aspiration would be to become an entrepreneur or to have their own startup. In London still, if you are an ambitious teenager, you want to be an investment banker. And this will probably change, and we see it changing around now. So what I want to talk to you today is about building apps for a very particular demographics. And I want you to think about the, and I will be talking to you about the app we are building, which is for consuming news, particularly business news. I want to talk to you about building an app for very specific demographics. And for that, I want you to think about the City of London and about FTSE 100 companies. Do you know what is FTSE 100? No? Do you know what is VIG 20? Yeah? Okay. So FTSE 100 is basically the index of the biggest publicly listed companies in UK. So these would be big pharmaceutical companies, banks, insurance companies, big retailers. What else do we have here? BP, obviously. And now think about their board members, their C-suite, their CEOs, CFOs, CIOs. And let's talk about building an app for these people. So I did a little research. I think we all have a brief idea of who these people are, but I actually pulled out some statistics. So 94.75% of them are white, and the rest obviously are of other ethnic minorities. 23% of them are women, which is not a lot, hopefully improving. But what is also interesting is that 73% of the FTSE 100 companies have no women at all in their executive positions. So this is that. In terms of their age or how long it took them to actually get to where they are, the average FTSE 100 employee has to wait 36 years from graduation to progress to board member level, assuming their career began at 21. So we're talking about people who's been working in a particular industry for a very, very long time. They have a lot of experience. They probably think they're very good at what they're doing, and they have a sense of that they are telling other people what to do and how things should be done, and that they know a lot and have a great understanding of the world. And also, 1 in 6 board members is age 65 or over, with an average of the age of 57. It probably also won't surprise you when I show you the statistics of their earnings. So the average FTSE 100 CEO, was this Bess? Was this a sign, or was this? So that is almost £5 million per year. And the other big discussion that is going on in the UK right now is that the gap of how much more they earn compared to the employees of their own companies. And we can see that on average, their salary is 183 times bigger than the average of their employees in their company, with the record holder that, I don't even remember the guy's name, but his salary is 810 times bigger than the average. It's some kind of an advertising company. So this is that. In terms of use of mobile devices, it's a really interesting group. Most of these people would have two phones. One of them will be a BlackBerry, which they have because very often the company bought for them. And they're used to it. They like the fact that it has a physical keyboard. They're kind of, they've been using it for a while and they just stick to it because back in the day it was the standard. But they also tend to have their private phone, and when they get a private phone, it's usually an iPad. It's usually an iPhone, sorry. The other interesting thing is that they usually have the newest model, and thanks to this, they usually have the newest iOS version because they wouldn't be really interested in updating the iOS version. They wouldn't know how to do it, or they would ask their PA to do it for them. But because they just get the new model when it comes out, they tend to have the new version, which is good for developers, obviously. The other thing is that they would also have an iPad. An iPad is kind of a standard in terms of board meetings. People will take their iPads to see the agenda, to have a glimpse at their mobile and the mail while they're in the meeting. So they're obviously used to that, and they're using it on daily basis. Talking about iPhone and BlackBerry, another interesting fact I found out is that actually someone measured that if someone is transitioning from a BlackBerry, they're more likely to transition to an iPhone, whereas if someone has an HTC phone or a Nokia phone, they're more likely to transition to a Samsung device. Fair enough. Other things which I think influence the way we think about building the app is, first of all, these are people who travel a lot. And they travel a lot because they spend a lot of time in a taxi, because London is a big city and they have to travel, spend a lot of time commuting to work. They travel for business as well. And this is the time when they use their mobile devices a lot. I talked to one of the senior partners in our company, and he told me that back in the day, he wouldn't imagine that the mobile will be his main device for consuming news. But now it's his thing that he does when he's in the taxi. He reads his email, he sees Twitter, and it became indispensable. In terms of their attitude towards technology, I think it's interesting and it's different for us because they don't expect the technology to be there. They really like if something works. They're like, okay, this is very nice. They're not going to criticize very much. They're not going to be, oh, this technology is horrible. Why is it like this? If something doesn't work, they just don't use it. move over. They have other important stuff to do. They will not be complaining about the technology a lot. They will not be, I don't know, leaving negative reviews, for example, maybe. They just move on. At the same time, they don't really have the habit of looking into possibilities of a technology solving their problem. So when I think about myself, I will often, if I find myself something takes too much time, I want to make something better, quicker, I want to have some entertainment, I'm thinking, oh, there should be an app for that, right? How often do we talk about it? Or I would even have this scenario in my head, like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if there was an app for that? These people don't have it. They don't have the habit of doing that, even if they have a specific problem that reasonably they could expect the technology would solve. They're not going to think, oh, maybe there's an app for that. If they find out about an app, it's either so mainstream that everyone already is talking about it, or maybe a friend will recommend it to them. But they don't proactively search for apps to solve their problems, everyday problems. In terms of paying for apps, there are definitely people who will pay for the app and see the value of the app if the app is working for them. And also an interesting thing I've heard is I will definitely pay not to be advertised to, which I think is something specific to this group. They value their privacy, they value the cleanness, they are not distracted when they're looking at their screen, so it's something they're willing to pay and they obviously can afford to pay. And another interesting thing that is not directly connected with it is that what surprised me is that some of them would like to use Apple Pay because they think it's nice, they might even be aware of it. Apple Pay is now available in UK as well, so you can pay for, if you get into a tube or a bus, you can just pay with your phone. But they won't, because some of them will be using private banks, which obviously are not mainstream and are not supporting Apple Pay yet, which I think it's kind of a surprising limiting factor for this technology to be used. And the last thing I wanted to say in terms of these people being users of the app is that I find interesting is that if they are seeking user support in any way, they are much more likely to call us or contact the founder of our company, which in many cases they will know personally, rather than tap on the unsubscribe link or send us an email, because they're just in the habit of it. So if they are seeking support, they either call us, they ask their PA to call us. So it's a bit different than what you probably expect. So that's that. That's what I wanted to kind of tell you about who these people are, what their daily life is, what they're doing, how they're using technology. And now I want to talk to you about three challenges that we found while building this app and how we solved them, or to what extent we were able to solve them. So the app we're building is called Briefcase and Boardroom Briefcase. On the left, you see the view of the Boardroom Briefcase, which is a paid app that we offer to our clients. And what it does, it curates the news that is important and relevant for them. So we have a tool which is sourcing all the articles from the influential media outlets, from influential publishers. And we have a team of analysts who will be looking at those articles once they are trimmed down by the tool and filtered. And we'll be writing summaries of this article and publishing them to the app, making sure that the CEO or any board member will get the news as soon as possible on their mobile device if there is something critical, because the analysts know exactly what this particular company is interested in. What we also have is, on the right side, is the Briefcase app, which is daily briefings of the business news and comments from New York, Singapore, and London. That is available to anyone, and it's on App Store as well. So if you are interested in business news, I really highly recommend that. It's something that Talken does just because Talken used to do it in a different form before, and I think it's of great value, even if you're not in financial sector directly. So what challenges we had with building the app and offering it to our users? The first one is the forgotten password. And I'm not even sure if this is a problem of strictly this group, but I can imagine how this group is specifically difficult in dealing with it. Typing password is hard. Typing on a mobile device is even harder, and typing when you are in a hurry and you are stressed is basically an extreme sport. And you realize that first when people are sending you, calling for support, you realize that when you look into the database and you see how many emails are obviously misspelled, so people register with con instead of com, or different versions, and you also notice how many duplicates there are, because people will be registering and then they will say their account is not there because now they're typing their email, and it's, I guess you know that. So what we can do about it? We are not ready to drop the sign in and the login because we need it for various reasons. So we're trying to find a solution to that. And the best thing we've came across and we are going to implement, this is something I'm going to show you on an example of a different app. We don't have it yet, is this. And the question is, do you know what app it is? And yeah, obviously. So what it does is, when you are opening Slack and you're not signed in, or you type sign in, it will show you type password or send a magic link, which is fantastic. It means you don't have to remember your password at all. What it will do is it will ask you to type in your email address. So this one you have to remember. And once you type in your email address, it sends the email. Then you receive the email. The email looks something like this: hello friend. Sign into Slack on your mobile device. You tap on it. It will then open Safari, and then you obviously have to go through another step, which is sign into Slack, and then you are asked, do you want to open the app? This is obviously the flow once you have Slack installed, and then you're in the Slack. I think it's a brilliant thing, and I think it can work both in signing in and the forgotten password flow. And I think it's really liberating to think that you can authenticate the user with actually the user still doesn't know the password in this flow, so they still don't know what their password is, but they're in. So we're gonna do that. Okay. A short break. One of the tweets. Yeah?
Why don't you deep link straight into the app? Why do you go through the website?
Okay, so I would say we do deep link to the app. So when you are doing this redirection, you can still deep link into the app. So in our case, how it would work is, for example, we can use a similar approach to different things, like you have a notification in your email, you open the briefing, and then you are not logged in, so we will log you in because it comes through the briefing, right? But on iOS, there is no way to do it directly. You can't go directly from the email to the app. You have to go through the browser, because this is how you are able to, actually it's the server figuring out if you have the app installed or not. Because of the way it works is there is something called URL schemes, and what will happen is that our server will try to hit a certain address with the URL scheme and see if this address works or not. Yes?
It's true till the iOS 9.
Yes, and I was going to say that in iOS 9 there is a different mechanism where you basically attach a JSON to your website where you kind of encode which URL schemes should be working. And I don't know that much, to be honest. I don't want to. I know there is before it was the handle open URL method. Am I right? Something like along those lines. And now it's changed into the deep linking with the JSON. Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Yeah, that I found it to be one of the funniest things recently. Anyone's using the new Magic Mouse? No? No? You're afraid of charging? Okay.
It's the same with the watch. You need to be super tricky with the
Well, yeah. I want to see the car anyway. Okay. The second challenge, the copyright law. So one of the reasons why we build the app in the first place is to overcome the problem where our users have all the subscriptions possible. So imagine that the app will roughly report on articles from about 20 sources, okay? Things like Financial Times, The Times, Wall Street Journal. Majority of them is behind paywall. So what will happen is that these users will have the subscription, but they really can't be bothered to kind of remember what their subscription was or get in touch to someone to find out what their credentials were if they want to read the full article. There is no time for that. They're not going to spend time on it. And if they find that they can't access the article, what they will do is they will get back to us, our part of the company, which is advisory, and they will say, can you send us the full article? And we can't do that because it infringes the copyright law. The other interesting thing about the copyright law is that it's actually forbidden to send someone that URL. And why is that? Because the URL, because of the search engine optimization, might contain part of the headline, which makes sense for searching. So the URL will have the headline or a part of the first paragraph to kind of give you a hint of what's behind it. But actually, the URL itself is protected by the copyright law because the headline was created by the author, hence it's their property. So this is an example where the law, the copyright law in this particular case, is just not in touch with technology at all. Because apparently it's not okay to send someone the full URL, but it's absolutely okay to send someone a hyperlink which will say read more here. Just that the URL is not visible, which I think is slightly absurd. Anyway, so we're trying to solve this problem of people, they have all the subscriptions, or if they don't have them, they're willing to pay for them, but they just need a handy way of accessing these articles. They're not going to play with the passwords. One password is already, enough, if not too much. How do we do that? So as I said, we have around 20 sources. And the first thing we were able to do is to reduce the number of logins that is required by teaming up with NLA, which is a British press association. It's an organization that is run by the big national papers in UK. And what they do is they offer an API which will allow us to have one login that will let these people access articles from many sources. Okay, so this is a bit better. So instead of 20 sources, we now have maybe 10 sources and then another 10 sources under one login, which is better. But the problem with that is that the NLA is completely not ready for mobile. So this is what you see. If we embed their website into our app, this is what you're going to see. And it's really not a nice user experience. And then what's worse, this is something you do once, so we can get around that. We have a client assistant who will go to the client, will show it to them, will make sure they are logged in every place. But then once you're logged in, you're going to see this, which again is almost impossible to read. And this is a problem we weren't able to solve for now. The best we got to was actually teaming up with NLA and showing them what we're doing. And they are now in the process of looking into the legal considerations of how else they can provide this content for us so that we can present it in a more readable way. And remember, we are still talking about people who are willing to pay all the fees, all that is due to the publishers, just to have something that is basically workable and usable. So this is one problem around the copyright. The next thing is also that you can imagine that some of those people might use Safari for now because they might already read Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal, and in Safari they are already logged in to those journals. But if we're using WebView, like you can see on this screen, the cookies are not shared between the WebView and the Safari. So even if they are logged in Safari, they will still have to log in again in the app. So the next thing we want to do is implement the Safari WebView controller. So this is, again, a new thing in iOS 9. where there are a lot of benefits to that, and people are talking about how it makes onboarding easier. They're talking about how it can help to transition users from web, using the web application into the app. But in our case, I think where it shines is that it actually shares the cookies and other website data between the Safari and this view, which is very good for us. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'll be able to show that. It's another kind of break that I have prepared. There's this guy on Twitter who's absolutely a master in the way I see it. And what he's doing is basically making impossible pancakes. And I just love it. And I often find myself shouting like, oh, a new pancake. And he's doing a lot of famous people, and he's doing a lot of weird things. And this one is he's basically making a pancake of an iPhone. And he's saying that the icons were really hard. I think it's really a mastery. And he's doing it for charity, which I think is also nice. So people basically donate some of money and tell him, hey, can you make me a pancake of X, Y, Z? And some of them are really impressive.
This is in fact the back.
Yeah, then he's flipping it. So he's doing it. He's also a big football fan, and he's doing a lot of logos of like football companies, or football teams, sorry. And what I found really impressive is how he's able to write backwards, because he has to write it backwards, so then when he flips it, it looks okay. Genius. I really recommend. Okay. Back to our presentation. So, okay. Now is this weird moment when I can see that the next slide has a typo on it, but I'm going to have to show it to you anyway. It's obviously challenge 3, not challenge 2. And it's the micro moments. Have you heard about the concept of micro moments? No? Okay. So the idea is that people are using the apps it's not like before. When you had a computer, you would probably decide, oh, I have to do this thing on the computer. So you sit at the computer, you do something for some amount of time, and then you finish, and then you're done. With the mobile apps, we're more and more kind of doing things, interacting with the apps in shorter and shorter intervals of time. Especially with the watch, you might be just looking at something. It might be seconds, rather than spending some long time in the app. So what the challenge that we have is we have really busy people, and what we're trying to give to them is offer them in a glance the possibility to see that there is something important going on in the press about their company, and there is nothing. And the important thing is that the fact that there is nothing there is just important piece of information as the fact that there might be something about them. So we're trying to not only make the app functional and have great content and be easy to use, but we're also trying to see how we can best fit into their workflow or their day. What you also need to realize is that these people spend most of their time with their phone in their email. And email is the first thing they open in the morning. Email is where they expect everything important to be. They tell us they don't like to have all these different apps that they are supposed to use because they just don't remember about all these different apps. If something can direct them from the email to an app, then it's fine, but they're not gonna go to another app. So the other thing we are trying to do now is we have email notifications which will be telling you that there is something new in the app that you should be reading. And the flow that I really liked we're gonna build is from Citymapper. Do you know Citymapper as an app? It's a brilliant app for city transportations. If you're living in a city like London, you will know it. It gives you all the times, all the routes. It finds a route for you, how to get from one place to another. And it also allows you to share your route with a friend or someone you're meeting at a certain place so that both of you can get there. So in this case, I got an email with a link to the Citymapper app that I also have installed. That someone is telling me, okay, you can track where I am and how I'm doing on my way to the meeting place with this link. Again, I'm clicking on the link, And you can see that in this case, I'm going directly to the app, which is the iOS 9 deep linking. So I'm skipping the whole Safari stage. And on top of the screen, you can see that I can either go back or I can even go to the website to the right, which I don't think is a default. I think it's something that Citymapper has done specifically for their app. So why is that great for us? It's great for us because it allows us to give users to still be in the email, but we can direct them to the app and we can allow them to read the full content, which we are not able to offer them in the email. And they can easily go back to the email where they kind of want to be and they want to continue. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So another challenge in terms of the micro moments and the fact that these people are maybe opening the app in a very specific moment and they expect the newest content to be there is how to organize the communication between our server and the app. And we had some basic assumptions that we made when we were designing the API. One of them was that we fetch the content as soon as possible. This is critical, right? We're offering our clients something that we want to call real-time service. So we really can't afford for them to be waiting for the content to be updated at weird times. We want to fetch it as soon as possible. The other thing is, on the other hand, we don't want to create too much traffic on our server. So we just want to forward so we only want to get the content when there is something new, and we only want to transfer as much content as is possible, as is necessary, sorry. So we don't want to be them to wait for a lot of content if they have it already. And we also can think of very different scenarios, and the reason we have them is because some of the users were reporting that the content was not updating. So there are things like the app was updated because someone published something on the server, so there is a notification coming to the app, and the app should get the new content. But what if the user has turned off their push notifications, right? The other thing we're doing is we can think of a case where the user doesn't have internet. They're in the tube, they have turned their phone off, and the notification did not get there, and for many various reasons as well. How do we make sure that we have some kind of backup mechanisms that will allow us or them, even when they realize the content is not there, will allow them to make sure that they're seeing everything they should be seeing? And so what we are doing here, we're using 3 different approaches. The basic one that probably should be first on this list is the silent notification. So this is a notification like any other push notification. It just doesn't show you the badge on the screen, and what it will do is this will update the app in the background. The interesting thing about push notifications, I guess some of you will know that, is that contrary to what you think, their default way of delivering them to the iOS device is by 3G rather than Wi-Fi. So it's more reliable to send push notifications if the user has a 3G rather than if it's on Wi-Fi. They will arrive as well, but the default one is 3G. So we're relying on silent notifications, but we can't. It's not enough, and it's not working in all those cases. We obviously also implemented the background fetch, which is a mechanism that will just tell the system basically that if the system learns that this user will open the app every single morning at 7:15 because that's when they enter the tube, it's probably wise to fetch the content a few minutes before that, and you can tell iOS you can define a method which will be called when the system decides that it's time for a background fetch. And then you just specify what calls should be made to the server to get the content and what content should be fetched. In this case, we are fetching all the new content that is not yet in the app. We're using the timestamps that are generating on the server. Another interesting thing about the background fetch that I read actually preparing for this presentation is that if your app is not in the background That is, you know, when you double, I don't know what's the official way of calling it. You might tell me, when you double press the home button and then you see this app switcher view, and if you kind of slide it away, get rid of it or shut it or whatever you want to call it, if you do that, then the app might not might not update and might not use the background fetch, but the documentation says it might not, which means that maybe it will, maybe it won't. Just chances are, you don't know what the chances are. But then we found that with all the people being offline and for various reasons, it's still not enough. So we thought that apart from the basic mechanism that fetches new changes only based on the timestamp that we have, we will also have kind of a recovery mechanism if something goes wrong. And for that we chose the pull to refresh. And the way we're using it is, if I have a view of all the issues of the UK headlines briefing, if I'm doing a pull to refresh on this view, instead of fetching only the changes, I will be fetching everything on this particular view. And this is because we have had problems where some content was fetched, was saved in the app incorrectly, there were some duplicates, and then the only way to solve it was basically to reinstall the app. So we came up with this idea that the pull to refresh should just be basically a recovery mechanism. It might take a bit longer, but we are scoping it down to only this one view, so it's not that big of a problem. Yeah, and this is what we went with. I'm happy to hear if you have any experience with that. I'm happy to hear what your ideas around that would be, if that's a good idea or not. The next thing I want to talk to you about is, very briefly, is I think as much as important is what we do, is what we don't do and what we decided that doesn't make sense spending time on. And the first thing is we don't build an Android app, which I think some of you will be disappointed here. And the reason for that is when I first talked with Talkan about this app, I asked the girl who was in charge of the project at the time, so among your clients, how many Android users are there? And she was like, no, I don't know any. and the amount of, there would probably be more demand for a BlackBerry app than for an Android app, but we're probably, well, we won't do it for other reasons. We don't extend the functionality of the app. We are thinking about it, but we haven't done it yet. So there are a lot of different ideas that kind of go together with what we're doing. There could be a chat, so you could discuss with other people from your company about the article. You could have maybe stock quotes, so you can quickly see how this particular article influences your share price. But I think the conclusion we have for now is that the users really like the fact that the app is simple and they find it easy to use, they find it really clear. And I think to a certain extent, I hesitate to implement more and more features. And I don't think this is the key thing that will make them decide to use the app. We also don't integrate with Touch ID. We thought it might solve our password problem, but if you think about it, the Touch ID is only useful the first time. So when you have to sign in, but then it doesn't really save you if you are logged out and you have to type in again, so it doesn't make sense. And we also don't focus too much on implementing the new UI features. So if I'm thinking about new things in iOS 9 like split view or 3D touch on new iPhones, I think we will probably do it, and I'm not saying people won't use it, but I think these things, taking into account the group we're targeting the app for, are not our first priority. And I think that the rule we're guided by on this one is that good UX doesn't necessarily mean a trendy design. So if you think about the app, it might not be the coolest, the coolest thing or the coolest design there is, or it might not have trendy animations or stuff like that. But actually, our users are telling us that they're liking it. They find it easy to navigate. They find it clear, and they know how to get from one place to another. And I think that's important. Okay, so now the cautionary tale. I'm going to tell you of the things that we've done wrong, and some of them were obvious, and some of them, just to warn you, just to refresh your mind, you probably know many of them or all of them. But just to say, we've done these mistakes, so please don't do them. First of all, never ever assume that the domain will not change. So you're starting a project, it's a startup, the company is called Talcan Analytics, and you're obviously sure that it's going to be called Talcan Analytics because we're not going to change the company name, right? Wrong. We're not going to change the company name, but we're going to rebrand to use the product name instead of the company name. And if you put these links into the app because your API relies on this domain name, it's really a bad idea. The other thing that is really interesting is that if you are trying to explain to people the terms app, native app, or web app, they're really confused. Really don't get it. So you just have to think, when you're talking to people, you just have to think in terms of functionality rather than the technology behind it to kind of let them know what the app does for them. The other thing that I'm sure many of you experienced as well is that what will happen is that you will submit a build to App Store and it will be fine. You will submit another one, it will be fine. And then on the third or fourth one, Apple will spot something that was absolutely fine for them for a long time. And then you're confused because when you get a rejection, you're expecting that the new build has broken something. But actually, it was something that was there from the very beginning. I just didn't notice that. And in our case, it was a video in the that you submit to App Store that the users can see when they're downloading the app. And it had a springboard. It began with a springboard and someone touching on the icon of our app. And there were obviously other icons as well, which is forbidden. But, well. Number 4 is that sometimes really trivial things can make a huge change. And in our case, the font size proved to be like the first biggest concern and the first biggest problem. So sometimes just fixing the font size, making it bigger, makes the user experience much, much better. And especially if you're working with senior people. The 5th one is what I found really useful, especially when internally testing the app, is to have this mechanism whenever you're building the app, you can actually have the badge on the icon that will tell you which build it was, which commit it was, which scheme did you use, or which target did you use, which scheme did you use for building this app. And it makes it really easy imagine I've installed the app to maybe 20 people in the office and then at different times, and they come back to me and I want to see, I know there is a problem, but I don't know which build it was. The 6th one was particularly painful. So we had this problem when the content was not updating and users were reporting they're not getting any new data. They were still logged in. It looked as if they were still logged in, but they just didn't get any new content in the app. And only signing out fixed it. So we found out that the problem was we had tokens expire on the server, but the app was not ready to handle that correctly. So the app thought the user is logged in, was showing everything fine, but the new content was not being delivered. So we fixed it with implementing an alert that told you your session has expired and you have to log in again. And we thought we fixed the problem, and then we were debugging it. And while I was testing it, I noticed that in many cases, I was getting the session expired alert without any reason. I just log in and I was getting the session expired. And it didn't make any sense. And it was a really nasty one. And then we found out that there is a bug in keychain that will cause the keychain to not be available in some way or not returning the data properly. That obviously caused the app to show that the session has expired. And it's only there if you are plugged into the debugger and your device is connected to Xcode. And the last one, another favorite of mine, is to never, ever, ever make changes to the core data scheme without a proper migration. And it was really painful for us again. So what happened is our developer relied on some kind of automatic migration that should work fine. It didn't. The app started crashing. When the app started crashing, the only way to solve it was to actually, with the new fix, to actually log everyone out, which you can imagine how much of a pain it was, taking into account what I've said before. So just to be sure that everyone knows where to look for it, it's in the editor, add model version. Please do that. Okay, how much time do I have? Am I running out of time? Yeah, okay, I'm really sorry. I'm just almost there. Okay, I'm gonna skip the funny part. 3 conclusions. First one, this famous quote. I want to encourage you to, when you're building the app, think about the functionality, the value that the app gives, and abstract from technology. I know it's hard when when both of your hands are actually on technology, but I think from the user's perspective, if you think in terms of, oh, it's a mobile app, so it's great because I have a mobile app and not a web app. For the user, it doesn't make sense. They don't even understand the difference. So abstract from the technology as much as you can and think about the user experience. Also remember that your app is part of a daily workflow of things that people are doing, their routines. It's really difficult to change what users are doing. It's really difficult to change their behavior. So as much as the functionality of the app itself, think about how your app interacts with other apps around, with mail, with web browser, and how you can improve this flow, because this will also influence how your app is perceived by the users. And copyright law is a minefield, and be prepared for that. Potentially, if you can do it right, there is a lot to win, because people are really pissed off and they're really looking for someone who will solve it. But you have to be really careful, because there are a lot of lawsuits going on around that. And I'm gonna finish with that. I wanna thank you for listening. I wanna thank Goody Labs, who are the team who's actually developing the app, for doing a great job on that. And I wanna say that if you know anyone who's in Łódź, or you know anyone, or if you would like to move to Łódź, Goody Labs is a place I would definitely recommend for developers. And almost finishing here. Probably you know Mobile Central Europe, the best mobile conference in Poland, probably, and maybe in Europe as well. I'm a big fan, and you might know or might not know that I'm also the founder of Łódź Wiosłuje, which is the iOS developers community in Łódź. And as Łódź Wiosłuje, I'm here to offer you this discount code. It's the MCE_lots_Wiosłuje, which will give you 15% off the tickets, probably. So feel free to use that. And yeah, that's all I have.